Hey TV fans, Board Now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about Lady in the Lake episode 2. The episode is called It Has to Do with the Search for Marvelous. Full spoilers as always from the start of this review, so this is episode 2 of the new Apple TV show starring Natalie Portman. And I was quite positive on episode 1. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It wasn't perfect, but not too bad. Solid stuff. A good way to get things going. I'm less positive on this one. I thought this one was a bit too messy at times, a bit too scrappy. Almost like something I said in the last review. I was a bit worried that they might try to cram too much into like 7 episodes in a mini-series or limited series, and it started to feel a little bit more like that this episode, and I'm not sure if it's just a pacing issue, like how it's been adapted, because it could be a problem with the book. I don't know, because I haven't read the book, but it does feel like over these first 2 episodes they have tried to cram a little too much in. And yeah, in this episode there wasn't the same sort of flow as episode 1. There wasn't the same sort of continuity between the 2 plots. It did feel like it was a bit more disconnected in this episode. Also, there's a couple of really cheesy moments in this one, like a couple of like really badly handled moments that were just a bit too OTT. But I do wonder if they are going for a little bit of a grab bag of like ideas and themes, because with this being like a period drama and set in the past, and they're like looking at these ideas to do with how women were treated in the past, how they were like treated as second class citizens, and then you have things like the racial issues. In this episode it gets brought up, the idea of how like lesbians would have been treated back in this time. And that's quite an interesting direction which the episode takes, actually. It might be one of the highlights of this second episode, because it's brought up at one point by this police officer who Maddie sort of befriends a little bit and starts talking to. But it's suggested by him that there's a rumour going round that her and Judith could be the killers, because they obviously reported the body and Maddie waited with the body. And there's just this rumour that they're together, they're like a couple, so it's been put out there by the press, then it's like a lesbian type killing. And especially this one journalist who we see up in a couple of scenes, played by Courtney B. Vance, I think his name in. I don't know if I've got that name, but he's known for being in like one of the Alien films, and I've seen him in quite a few things. He's one of those character style actors. I think it was Alien 3 he was in, but he's a really good actor. He plays like the journalist in this episode. But that was quite an interesting angle that they put on it. So I'll start by talking about the Maddie plot. It probably is easiest just to focus on one side, one character at a time, and go from there. So I'll start off with Maddie, who I think might have had the weaker plot this time around. I think I was a bit more into the stuff with Cleo this episode. But the way the episode opens up is that we go back to 1947. And this is for a little bit of context, because we see that Maddie is a journalist at this time, and she has an interview with an artist who's the mother of her boyfriend at the time. He sets up the interview, and she's really excited because she feels it could lead to other opportunities, like she's got connections with high profile artists. And the interview isn't going too great. Like, the mother is pretty standoffish with her. And also she's a bit critical and is like putting her under scrutiny when it comes to what are your feelings towards my son, because as she puts it, I've never seen him really. I don't know if she says gaga, but it's a similar sort of phrase. Like, I've never seen him feel this way about a girl before, but she's almost turning the heat up on Maddie in that scene, like almost trying to get her to say how she feels about the son. And then when the father comes in, who's a little bit on the creepy side, he does seem to be flirting with Maddie, which maybe says he's in a little bit of a loveless sort of marriage. But he seems to be flirting with her. And then he gives her a tip of how to get the wife to open up and give her a better interview. And she kind of does that, and the interview goes better after that. But then we cut to her leaving the house later, and she's looking for the husband, I think. Like, she calls out his name as she's leaving, and she sees a painting of a girl in the lake, like a murdered girl. And that, I think that's just a way to, like, jump back to the present again, or to the future. Jump forward to the future, I should say, because it just sets this thing up. Whether it's going to have anything important to do with what actually happened to the Jewish girl, Tessa, in the future, I'm not really sure. It could just be that it's a way to link the two things. Because then we move forward to the present, and Maddie is questioned by the police about what exactly happened, and that's when she meets this other cop called Mr. Black, which is probably intentional. He is an African American cop, and we see some of, like, the kind of nasty casual, like, racism, like the way, like, the chief of police talks to him in the police station. Also, like, this really crude comment he makes to Maddie when he drives her home later, because he says something like, "You'll be alright in this neighbourhood as long as you keep that mud on your face," because she's got mud on her face from when she found the body. Because at the moment she is staying in this neighbourhood, and yeah, it's the African American neighbourhood, and yeah, so he's implying she might not be safe around there. Leave that mud on your face. So we really get a sense of what he's all about. So the next day, Maddie goes to pick up her things, and the mother-in-law is there, like, so Milton's mother, and she is just being a right bitch and really passive aggressive and criticizing Maddie for walking out on them. And then obviously Milton starts up, and Maddie, because at this point the news has spread about the girl being found, so Maddie points out that the funeral is that next day, and the son questions it, saying, "Why are they always so fast?" Which is a good point, but Maddie answers it in the scene. She says it's so that the soul can move on quickly or something. So I don't know if this is meant to be a Jewish thing, that they just have the funeral pretty much straight away so that everyone can mourn and move on, or if it's just something which is, like, they've just done for this drama. But it feels like it might be something that's in the Jewish culture, like. So Maddie talks them all to go into the funeral. She also asks her husband, Milton, aka Murray out of Stranger Things, she asks him for some money. And this becomes a big part of Maddie's story in the episode, because we're seeing that again. She's going to struggle to get hold of money. She's going to struggle to be able to go out on her own and live independently from Milton. It's just this unfair sort of disadvantage that she's at, where she's not taken seriously if she's outside of the marriage, if she's outside of the home, and yeah, she's not going to get the same sort of benefits or the same bit of, like, credibility than her husband would, or if people knew she was with the husband, that kind of thing. So that becomes a big thing in the episode, where we see her desperation to get money. So they go to the funeral, and someone has like spray painted the tombstones with like swastikas, I think. And so the idea is that it's someone who's a Nazi, who's like being anti-Jewish, and it's a whole thing. It's obviously very upsetting, and the mother comes up to Maddie. So I think the idea is that this is the woman from the past, the artist, because I noticed the surname was the same. So I think that's like the family of the girl. And I think it's just a clever little, like, this is a change now, because in the past she wasn't that respectful of Maddie, but she really appreciates what Maddie did by staying with the body, and that's a nice payoff to the end of the last episode, because Maddie made a point to Judith of saying, just go, just let me stay with the body. If you were a mother, you would understand. So that's a nice little payoff to that scene, because Maddie is proven right. Then the mother does appreciate that, and so she hugs her and is all emotional. And I think this is where the episode takes a little bit of a turn, because even though I could appreciate this scene and what it was doing, I think it's also quite heavy-handed, and it does get a little bit melodramatic, this scene, like just the mother like crying uncontrollably, and there's just something a little bit too soapy about it. Because at one point, the son as well, I forget his name now, but the one who was quite irritating in the last episode, he just like walks off because he sees the other, like the mother, getting upset, and he doesn't know what to do with it, and he has taken like the father's side in all this. So he walks off, and the father tries to call him back, but like, I don't really care about the son because I've not really been given a reason to care about him. So him storming off like that doesn't really do anything to me. But some of the Maddie stuff in this episode was pretty weak. There were a couple of like kind of cheesy scenes like that. The other one was when there's a montage of her going around town trying to get money off people because she's getting desperate to get some money together. She's also waiting to get some money back from the insurance, which is what the cop tells her. And he says because there's certain ambiguities to do with what happened, because she gets robbed in this. That's the other big storyline. And they're investigating that. And once again, it's just showing you that because she is a woman, there's more suspicion cast over her than if she was a man and like the head of the family. But yeah, there's a scene where she's going around trying to get money and she keeps getting turned down, and you see her driving in the car and she screams at one point, cries out loud, and that was another rough scene. I think that and the funeral scene were probably my least two favourites. Although there is another one actually, the funeral scene compared to that one, and then another scene which I'll mention isn't as bad. So the other scene I was thinking of, which I think is definitely a really over the top silly scene, is that at one point we randomly cut to this guy, this weirdo, who's in his bath, and he's got like one of those like miner helmets on, like you see in My Bloody Valentine or St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but he's got one of them on, and he's got like bugs in the bath with him, and he's doing all kind of weird things. And the mother comes home at one point, and it's a really uncomfortable scene because she does like whip him really hard and starts shouting at him. So it's uncomfortable to watch because he's obviously naked, being in the bath. But yeah, that scene comes out of nowhere, and you think, who is that guy? And I know the actor. I think he's the one who's in like Umbrella Academy, who plays like one of the main cast members in that. He's very recognisable, but I think it is him. But the problem with his character is then he just feels a little bit one note, and he just comes out of nowhere. And yeah, just the way they portrayed him in the episode was a bit over the top and just a little bit silly, because it turns out he's the guy from the pet store who we saw in the first episode serving the girl. And the girl, by the way, is the Jewish girl who was found dead. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So it wasn't Maddie. I assumed it was Maddie, but it does make more sense because by this time, Maddie's obviously an adult, so it makes sense. And I thought at the time it was a younger Maddie, but it's the Jewish girl who went missing. And the importance of that is because she was seen in the pet store close to her death, then the guy in the pet store becomes a suspect. So that's why you see him in that bath scene, because it's kind of like, okay, this guy is a little bit weird. But as things go on, it becomes clear that he's meant to have like mental health issues. And this is another thing they're poking at. Then during this era, these things weren't really out in the open, and there was a lack of awareness, and people just didn't understand it. So they react to stuff like that in a very negative way, where they see these people as just like kind of weirdos, and they're freaks and they're a threat, and they react in that way rather than actually being sensitive and being understanding about them. So that's how we're going, is then he becomes a suspect, and the journalist who I mentioned earlier, he's partly behind this because he pushes the angle in the press, and it's this guy. And the police just run with it. They almost like they just want to solve the case. So they go to the pet store, and this guy is going like crazy with his mother, and seems from their point of view to have her held up at gunpoint, and seems on the verge of like maybe killing her. And they're like threatening him and saying, if you don't come out and stuff with your hands up, we're going to kill you. And at one point they do shoot through the window, and like it barely sort of misses him, and eventually they arrest him, and they seem to think that's it. But that scene was really bad. That scene and the scene with Maddie in the car, I thought, were the two weakest scenes in the episode. So it just got a little bit too silly, and this is what I mean about them maybe trying to do a bit too much, because they're obviously opening up this angle of, well, like this idea of mentally handicapped people during this time. But it just comes down to how you handle it, and like, is this really, like, are you really giving this enough time in the plot? So the idea is that ultimately they're going to assume it's this guy because he is a bit of an oddball. He's seen as being a bit of a weirdo, and like over time it will be revealed, but he's arrested, so everyone assumes, hey, we've got the suspect. Maddie is later told then she can have her money now from the insurance, and things seems to be going along okay for her, like improving. Her and Judith are sharing like a joint at one point, so it's like a smaller part really for Judith in this episode, and they're just sort of like discussing their lives. And I think you see in that scene that Maddie's kind of missing being with her husband, or being in like at least a relationship where she's treated well and she gets to express herself. So the next thing is the officer comes to the door, and he tells her the news: the guy was arrested and your money should be on the way soon, because she was robbed. Like her ring was taken, but like And I think because she's getting lonely, she invites him in, and you see them sleeping together. So that's sort of the end of the Maddie plot in the episode. So if we switch to the Cleo plot, because I think that was the more interesting plot this time around. So Cleo is hoping to get a job working for a political candidate. And she's hoping to do this so that she can move away from the nightclub owner, who seems to be into all sorts of shady stuff. He seems to be some sort of a gangster or connected to that kind of world. But it's not as simple as she's hoping, because she's pretty confident she's got the job in the bag. And part of the reason is that she spoke at that convention the previous day, and that seemed to put her in good faith with the people involved in the party. But then when she goes for the interview, the woman tells her then our white donors are getting nervous about you working with, I forget the guy's name now, actually. He's played by Wood Harris, but the nightclub owner, so it's the ties to him which is almost preventing her from getting the job. And at one point Cleo has this line to do with, well, if you give me the job, then I don't have to work for him anymore. I can leave him. And the woman says, well, you never leave him. You never leave Mr. whatever his surname is. It's gone out of my head now. But it's that kind of idea that no matter what she does, she almost can't get a break. But then the woman has another idea. She says, well, maybe we can work something out. If you can get kind of dirt on this guy, then maybe we can work something else. Maybe we can use you. And it's that idea where suddenly this woman is trying to use Cleo for her own purposes, because the way she puts it is, if you can play a part in getting me re-elected, then maybe we can use you. So it once again shows the compromise a little bit, where Cleo, she's making a little bit of progress, and it seems like she might be able to escape the life that she's currently in, but then there always seems to be a catch. There always seems to be some hurdle and manipulation going on. Because in the next scene, she films this message, or she's filmed giving this message, and it's meant to be this very honest kind of message about her life. She talks about how she is she's just seen as her job. So she has these multiple jobs. She works behind the bar at the nightclub. She also does the books in the nightclub, although it's the unofficial books, because that's a thing that's made a big deal of later. And it's the other job she has. So she almost becomes known for that. And that's a big theme in this series. Then Theo is constantly reduced to that. She's never known by her name or for kind of who she is as a person. It's just what job she performs. And I wasn't quite sure if this was meant to be in her head, but at one point things seem to be going okay, but then she does have a breakdown type thing. And then the next time you sort of see her is she's back in the nightclub. And now I think it's not made clear in the episode, but I think either she's pursuing this as a way to try and be able to move over and then get the job with the political candidate so she can leave that life behind, or the woman involved has told her to do this and said, this is the way it's going to go down. If you help us, we can help you get out. So I definitely got the impression, the way the episode was playing out, that she was maybe almost going undercover for like the other woman, like almost like trying to get dirt on this gangster to like expose him, and that way it's not really an issue. They can maybe get this guy locked up or something, and like it won't really be a problem, Cleo like leaving and going with them. But it seemed to be that, because when she suggests to the gangster about like maybe doing his official books rather than like the other books that she's currently doing. But again, there's a compromise, because he says to her, that sounds like a good idea, but the one catch is he wants her brother. I think it's actually her partner. This was a bit confusing to me, because this show at the moment is a little bit confusing at times. But Slappy, anyway, he says, then you can have the job if you get Slappy in the club. And this is something which she has resisted up to now. But yeah, that's the compromise. So she has to tell him that you've got a gig that night, you've got this opportunity. She tells him in like a pub. Once again, he's kind of lazing about in a pub, and he agrees to it, and things seem to be going well. But so he does some pretty edgy humour in the club, and the crowd seem to be lapping it up. But also her son is in the club at one point, and that's just another way that Theo's life is being kind of like, people in her life are being dragged towards this life that she's leaving, which is going to put them in harm's way. And like, it's bad enough that she's in these sorts of positions and maybe doesn't have a lot of say in it, but to have her family involved, like at one point she gets pissed that her son is near one of the people behind the scenes in the club, and she just lays down the law and says, no, this isn't going to happen. So they leave the club, and she kind of is quite strict with the son. But then later on, when Slappy has done this performance in the club, she's told that she must go and do an airing for the boss. And the airing is that she has to deliver this drug money. And that puts her back in harm's way, because it's this really quite intense scene where she goes to see these guys, and a couple of them are quite high already, and one of them is meant to be like the driver, but he's in no fit state to drive. So that's kind of how she gets roped into like driving to this thing, this sort of like gig, this like, well, it's something crooked. It's something to do with like a deal or something like that. And she just wants to leave. She just wants to like deliver the money and get out of there. And one of them comments, yeah, hey, she's feisty. I quite like her, because like she does stand up to them, where like they try and stop her from leaving, and like, who do you work for? And she says, well, you're going to find out if you don't let me leave. And so she's definitely, once again, a brave sort of character, very like bold and feisty. But she's forced to go along and drive them, and she almost gets shot as a result. She's waiting in the car, and at one point, I'm not sure if it's the boss of this group or one of the other guys, but he comes running out, shooting at this other guy who's fleeing the house. And the bullets almost hit Cleo at one point, and she scrambles from the car and runs away. And that's pretty much like the end of the episode. So yeah, I did prefer the Cleo stuff in this episode, I would say, overall. Not so much the Maddie stuff. But yeah, I was definitely more mixed on this. I wasn't as keen on this episode, so yeah, see how it goes. There's episode 3 will be up next week on Wednesday, I think, so I'll be checking out episode... No, it's actually Friday, sorry. I'm probably thinking of Sunny. That goes up on a Wednesday, I think. But yeah, next Friday. So that's my thoughts on episode 2 of Lady in the Lake. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. share me out on social media and let me know what you think of the show so far. But thanks for listening and goodbye.